In a world teetering on the edge of chaos, the European Union scrabbles to contain the inferno engulfing the Middle East. With Israeli airstrikes pounding Iranian soil and Tehran's retaliatory salvos lighting up the night sky, the bloc convenes an urgent video conference of foreign ministers in a race against regional collapse. As Europe calls for calm, questions loom. Can diplomacy still prevail where missiles have spoken? Can the EU, often accused of double standards, forge unity among foes divided by decades of hostility? Behind closed doors, the pressure mounts. This is more than crisis management. It's a test of Europe's geopolitical will in the face of fire. I'm Rana Al-Khassas and welcome to Think Tank.
Our world is becoming unhinged.
Al-Sharq al-Awsat has reported that the European Union has sounded the alarm. U.S. involvement in the escalating Israeli-Iran conflict risked igniting a far broader regional war. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas warned that deepening American engagement could dangerously widen the crisis, undermining stability across the Middle East. During a high-level call with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the bloc stressed the need for restraint. In an emergency video conference, EU foreign ministers unanimously endorsed a political path to peace, urging all parties to respect international law and avoid provocative actions. They emphasized the urgent need for de-escalation, especially amid rising hostilities between Israel and Iran. The EU reaffirmed its stance that diplomacy, not force, must prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. As tensions soar, Europe positions itself as a mediator, striving to contain the flames before they engulf the entire region. Israel and Iran trade devastating strikes. The EU rushes to mediate as fears mount of a catastrophic regional war. Can diplomacy do the job and the flames before end the flames before it's too late?
The European Union scrambles to contain a fire that threatens to engulf the entire Middle East and beyond. In an emergency video conference convened by High Representative Kaja Kallas, EU foreign ministers are racing against time, seeking de-escalation after Israel's unprecedented strike on Iran's Fordo nuclear facility and Tehran's retaliatory barrage. This is not just another flare-up, it's a full-blown military exchange between two regional titans, each bound to cripple the other's strategic capabilities. Yet the EU has made its position clear: no nuclear weapons for Iran, but also no disproportionate violence. It calls for restraint while quietly reaching out to both Tel Aviv and Tehran. But the stakes couldn't be higher. A miscalculation could trigger a regional war, spiking global oil prices, disrupting trade, and risking radioactive fallout from damaged nuclear sites. Behind closed doors, secret talks are underway. Could Europe resurrect the Iranian nuclear deal? Or is it too late? For now, as the world watches, the European Union faces its greatest diplomatic test yet. Can diplomacy prevail where missiles have failed? Behind closed doors, the race to contain the inferno continues.
Providing more analysis about the most recent updates concerning the outcomes of the EU Foreign Ministers' emergency meeting. Can the EU mediate the Israeli-Iranian crisis? Joining us from Paris is Mr. Meher Nicolas Ferzilli, Director of the EU Asian Center, and from Cairo, Dr. Nourhan Sheikh, Political Science Professor. Welcome to Think Tank, and it's a pleasure to have you with us on the show today. We start off with Mr. Ferzilli. Sir, with U.S. involvement raising fears of a regional war, can Europe act independently while maintaining transatlantic unity? And do you think that the United States will intervene and be part of this war?
I'm delighted to join you today. And the short answer to your question is no. Very simply why? Because today what they have convened is not even a physical meeting of European and NATO foreign ministers in Brussels or Luxembourg or Berlin or whatever. They have just done a video conference. So symbolically, foreign ministers are below the ranking of presidents and prime ministers, and foreign ministers don't decide about war and peace, but these guys haven't even met in person. They just spent 1 hour or 2 hours by video conference. So of course, if you are Iranian or Israeli and you watch the Europeans today, it's a joke. It's a joke. But who are the real European
powers? Sir, why is it a joke? It's a trial to mediate to stop the Israeli-Iranian war.
Because the real European powers, the real European Union powers are Germany, France, Italy.
Germany doesn't want escalation, sir.
No, but they are not in Europe today. So they are in Calgary attending the G7 summit, right? So
yeah, but they're still discussing in the summit what's taking place in Iran, in Iran and Israel, and the conflict that's taking place over there.
Of course. But if they really wanted to send a strong signal, what would have they done in Calgary? You would have seen Friedrich Merz, the German Chancellor, Giorgia Meloni, the Italian Prime Minister, Emmanuel Macron, the French President, together with Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister. You'd have seen them going into a side room and having a joint European meeting. After all, that's what they do for Ukraine. You know, for Ukraine, you see the Europeans theatrically moving to their own meeting room in Washington or Calgary or Ottawa and pretending that they are making decisions on Ukraine. Why don't they do it regarding Iran? That says a lot. So they are not implicated in the decision. But more broadly, clearly, all the cards are now in President Trump's hand. So Europe has never been weaker globally. And if we focus on Western Asia, the Middle East, Iran, Israel, in that part of the world...
Sir, why are all the cards in the U.S. President Donald Trump's hands now? Why?
Because, and this is difficult to understand for Europeans, but it's also difficult to understand for other people, Trump is not a neocon. So he's often described as a right-wing reactionary neocon in the mold of George W. Bush, right, or Liz Cheney. He's not. Actually, in Europe, in Paris, Berlin, London, today, and it's really a cruel irony, you have more neoconservatives. So today, European policymakers, not all of them, but many of them, their worldview is that of George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. And so the one who's kind of it's difficult to understand because it's a paradox. Here, the big paradox, the only one truly believing in peace in the Middle East is Trump. And it's hard to understand because, of course, in Gaza...
You said the only one that's believing in the Middle East at this point is Trump?
At this level, at this level of decision-making. And it's hard to understand because, of course, in Gaza...
Oh, so you want to say he is the decision maker, but not the one that cares for the Middle East.
In Gaza, he gave a free rein. So in Gaza, Trump gave a free rein to Israel. And so that's why it's difficult to understand. But in Iran, he is not giving a free rein to Israel. So completely different from the situation in Gaza. And so that's why Trump is holding the balance of power. So he's the one who can tilt the balance one way or another. And quite frankly, Trump doesn't like the Iranian regime, right? Don't get me wrong. He has no sympathy He has no sympathy for Ali Khamenei, the Murshid, the Grand Ayatollah, but he's a realist. He's a cynical, blunt realist. And in the broader context of the Chinese-American Cold War II, the big game, the great game, he doesn't want to destabilize Iran. Israel is making a very different calculation from Trump. Israel, they really want to destabilize Iran. So here we see diverging interests, and that's why I'm saying Trump is the only one who can keep the peace in the Persian Gulf today. As it's a paradox, I know, it's difficult to understand.
Okay, Mr. Fazeli, sorry, we have to move on now to the European Council of the European Union to make the full coverage of what's going on there. And we're moving on there. Qnews takes you there to make a coverage and
the United States to arrive at a permanent ceasefire and to put an end to the Israeli siege on Gaza. Egypt calls upon you to implement United Nations resolutions and to adopt a new Security Council resolution that obliges Israel to put an end to its aggression and its crimes. Mediation does not run counter to the role of the United Nations and its bodies in putting an end to the aggression and saving innocents. 6. Egypt warns of the danger of the escalating occupation practices in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Egypt calls for an end to the Israeli attacks on Palestinian cities, to put an end to the expansion of settlements, to punishing the settlers for their terrorism, to allow the sisterly and brotherly Palestinian people to move with no limitations and to be able to access the resources, to put an end to the violations perpetrated against holy sites in Jerusalem and affect its status, and to lift all the limitations that are being imposed on the UNRWA and its work in the occupied Palestinian territories. 7. Egypt condemns the Israeli attacks against the Islamic Republic of Iran. We condemn any practices that are a violation of international law, the United Nations Charter, and the sovereignty of countries, their territorial integrity, the principles of good neighborliness, and the peaceful settlement of disputes. We express our concern over this dangerous escalation, which warns of grave consequences on the security of the region. Egypt confirms the need to rid the Middle East of weapons of mass destruction and nuclear weapons in accordance with relevant international resolutions with no selectivity. We stress the need that all countries in the region must accede to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Mr. President, we can list once again the statistics that reflect the catastrophic situation in Gaza, the criminality of the Israeli aggression, but we definitely do not need further evidence to justify saving the Palestinians. Those of us who need to see the pictures of dead children, of grieving mothers, of civilians burning alive to find a reason to put an end to this massacre, and we do not need these pictures to put an end to this massacre that nobody can deny. What is happening in Gaza is a source of shame to the international community as a whole, and it must be stopped immediately. In closing, and in light of the above, we ask the members of the General Assembly to continue in their noble position that supports the rights of the Palestinian people, that support the right of the Palestinian people to have their independent state with East Jerusalem as its capital, and to grant it full membership in the United Nations. This is the only path to peace in the region. There is no other path. There is no room to stand in neutrality, because silence is collusion, and any hesitation in supporting the Palestinian rights is treachery, and voting in favor of any draft resolution that aims to save the civilians in the Palestinian territories is a legal obligation and a moral necessity. Do not let humanity down. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Egypt. Now I give the floor to His Excellency Ivan Gil Pinto, Minister of People's Power for Foreign Relations of a Bolivarian.
Egypt condemns the Israeli strikes with the sovereignty of Iran and expresses, of course, Egypt expresses its concern. Egypt confirms that it does not, that it wants to get rid of any weapons in the region of mass destruction, and that it is unacceptable for any country in the region to have weapons of mass destruction for the sake of the entire region and the non-proliferation treaty. And of course, these were the words of the EU Egypt's permanent representative at the United Nations. And also he discussed Gaza and he said we should put an end to this massacre in Gaza that's taking place. What's happening in Gaza is criminal law to the international community. The only path is peace in the region. No other stand could be taken. No neutrality, this was his words. Legal obligations do not let humanity down. He also discussed the escalation of the situation in Gaza and that human civilians and which are, of course, on top of the civilians, women and children that are killed in atrocities and genocides every day in Gaza, and and he really condemned what's happening at this point in Iran, not with the idea of weaponizing or of nuclear weapons, but the idea of a conflict that is escalating at this point. Again, we're back to our program, Think Tank, after we, of course, heard the words of Egypt's permanent representative at the EU, the United Nations. And we move on to Mr. Fazeli. Mr. Fazeli, do you want to comment on Dr. Osama Abdel Khaliq's words?
Yes, of course. I think he used the word humanity. And I think, when we talk about the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, I think what comes first is not politics or geopolitics. Sadly, because of the war and the massacres, it's framed as a geopolitical power play. But I think that in reality, it's humanity. It's about human beings, civilians, children, women dying, and that has to stop. So regardless. Of course, there are geopolitical considerations, but it's been a long time that part of Gaza Strip.
What about, sir, when he, of course, said or was discussing that what's happening in Gaza is a criminal war that's taking place in atrocities and genocides, and that it is taking place, it's a criminal law to the international community, which we are discussing in our program now, as, of course, we're discussing the role of the European Union in light of what's happening in Israel and Iran at this point. How do you relate this, sir?
So Egypt has always been a force for peace and stability in the Middle East for the past, 60 or 70 years. And I think what the Egyptians always do, and they are right to say so, especially at the United Nations, right, is the rule of law. There is international law, and there are United Nations resolutions focusing specifically on the fate of civilians in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. We tend to focus on Gaza, but the West Bank is equally important, and these international laws, UN resolutions, for the past 50 years really, have been completely ignored and disregarded. So here Egypt is right. There is a double standard. If the color of your skin is brown or black, if you happen to be North African or Arab or Muslim or Asian, the value of international law is not the same. Look at Ukraine. All the UN resolutions passed specifically on the issue of Ukraine, they have been more than implemented. So the European Union has spent trillions of dollars every month on Ukraine.
Sir, so as the United States, I'll leave it there and I'll go to Dr. Nourhan. A very warm welcome to the program, Dr. Nourhan. And with Lebanon and Gaza still reeling Could this new front between Israel and Iran drag other regional players into a multi-front conflict?
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me with you.
Always
Actually, nobody knows at that moment what would be happen. I mean, I think Houthis already joined and they represent some kind of supporting front to Iran. Pakistan expressed it's willing to support Iran when it is needed. So nobody know what will going on. If the United States, maybe Britain and France as well, joined strikes against Iran, and this is possible. And the three countries express also their readiness to support Israel. At that moment, nobody know what will happen and how far that escalation would be widened in the region and maybe outside also the region. So it is maybe possible, but not, I mean, not Arab Gulf countries or some Arab countries, but maybe other countries who are already expressed their willing to support Iran.
Dr. Norhan, is there a risk that the EU's focus on containing Iran overlooks the broader instability caused by the ongoing Palestinian crisis?
I think that EU has no such a good stand as EU because France, as well as some other countries, which are or those are members in G7, biased a lot toward Israel. And they confirmed in their declaration, G7 declaration, their support for Israel to defend itself. At the same moment and same declaration, they mentioned to Iran as the main cause for instability. So the EU, I think, has no strong stand toward peace. They are supporting blindly Israel, and regarding that, Israel
but I
is the
think
one
that
who
France
started.
is trying to help. Do you think France is trying to help?
I don't think so, because what they committed themselves in the declaration will not help a lot, because if they want to be a mediator, they should be fair enough, and they should also to be on a one distance or the same distance from Israel and Iran. But what we are saying that they are biased and they are stuck themselves with Israel, and that, from my point of view, will not help to mediate in that struggle.
Got
Maybe
your take. Thank you very much, Ms. Norhan. Mr. Ferzili, could revived GCPOA negotiations under EU leadership prevent further nuclear brinkmanship, or has the window for diplomacy already closed?
So sadly, I'm a European myself, so I wish Europe had the will and the strength.
You're a European, but you like America so much.
No, but what I do, to be honest, I criticize the neocons. And so this is why when I defend the White House, my perspective is not necessarily because I support Trump. It's because I criticize the neoconservative movement, because most of the wars that have shattered the Middle East and North Africa in the past 20 years, Iraq, Libya, the destruction of Iraq and Libya, these were neocon projects. And Trump, for personal and also policy thinking reasons, he's against the neocons. So that's why I sometimes, take his defense. To make a long story short, Europe today, one of the reasons Europe today is not unified is many of the policymakers actually are neocons. So today, George Bush, Dick Cheney, Hillary Clinton are gone, but in Europe, in Berlin, Paris, and London, there are many admirers of George Bush and Hillary Clinton and Dick Cheney, and they want war. So let's take Kaja Kallas. Kaja Kallas, she is the foreign minister of the federal government of Europe called the EU Commission. Kaja Kallas personally, she is personally close to the right wing of the Likud party. So how can you expect her to be neutral? Of course she's not neutral. And the same goes for Friedrich Merz, the new German chancellor. He's also strongly aligned with the neoconservative movement in America and with the Likud party in Israel. So that's why I'm saying, as strange as it sounds, compared to them, everything is relative. Compared to them, Trump is less of a hawk. Compared to them, Trump is more peaceful regarding Iran and the Persian Gulf. Because to him, the Persian
Gulf... So, Mr.
Gulf...
Fazeli, a yes or no, the European Union will not play the role that anyone imagines it's going to be playing as a mediator?
Sadly, I think it doesn't have...
Thank you very much. I'm out of time, so of course I want to make more of your informative and, of course, valuable intellectual knowledge, but I'm out of time. Mr. Meher Nicolas Ferzilli, Director of the EU Asian Center, and Dr. Nourhan Sheikh, Political Science Professor. Sorry, did not give you enough time, but I think there was an audio problem. Thank you very much for your informative, of course, knowledge and for your insights. The Middle East stands at a crossroads where precision strikes meet with geopolitical chaos. As Israel and Iran test limits, the world watches, waiting for either fire or diplomacy to prevail. That brings us to the end of today's episode of Think Tank, which always unveils the complexities of our changing world. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.